surrounded by men in bowler hats shouting orders, and marble pillars carved with the names.
Around you flows the global financial system. Every international trade settlement, every cross-border loan.
An empire that spans 1/4 of the Earth's landmass. An empire that has dominated global finance for 200 years.
If you tapped a British banker on the shoulder in 1945 and told him 11 years in 1956,
Britain would lose its entire empire and the pound would become worthless on the global stage, he would have called you insane.
Britain just won World War II. We defeated Hitler. We still have the Royal Navy.
The pound is backed by the Bank of England, the most powerful financial institution on Earth.
The system is too big to fail.
Now, fast forward to today. Stand on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Look at the digital tickers flashing across every screen.
Look at the 800 military bases America maintains in 80 countries across the globe.
Observe how every barrel of oil, every international debt instrument, every central bank reserve is denominated in US dollars.
If I told you that by the year 2027, the dollar would lose its reserve currency status,
You would have the exact same reaction as that British banker in 1945. You would say, America is too big to fail.
the dollar is backed by the US military. The system is permanent.
But history is not a collection of random events. It is a pattern. It is a cycle that repeats with mathematical precision.
And the pattern that destroyed British financial dominance in 11 years is not just similar to America's current situation.
it is identical. The same mechanism, the same timeline, the same fatal mistake. And we are not at the beginning of this cycle.
The scariest thing about the fall of the British pound is not that it happened, it is how fast it happened once the crack appeared.
From 1945 to 1956, just 11 years, Britain went from controlling global finance to being a...
And the mechanism that killed the pound is the exact mechanism killing the dollar right now.
Today, in 2026, we are going to hold up a mirror. We are going to show you the blueprint.
And we are going to prove to you that 2027 is not just a random year.
It is the mathematical endpoint of a reserve currency cycle that has already entered its terminal phase.
This is not a conspiracy theory. This is documented economic history. And once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it.
To understand the end, we have to understand the beginning.
Britain did not always have the global reserve currency.
In the early 1800s, multiple currencies competed.
The Dutch guilder, the French franc, the Spanish peso.
But Britain had something the others did not. Gold.
Vast amounts of gold flowing in from colonial conquests. India, Africa, Australia.
This gold allowed Britain to do something revolutionary.
In 1821, Britain officially adopted the gold standard. The British pound became a receipt for a specific weight of gold.
1 pound sterling equaled 113 grains of pure gold.
Promise. This was not a promise. This was a contract.
If you held a pound note, You could walk into the Bank of England and exchange it for actual gold, no questions asked. This created something extraordinary: trust.
Merchants in New York and Shanghai and Buenos Aires all wanted to be paid in British pounds because pounds were as good as gold.
Better than gold, actually, because pounds could be transmitted by telegraph, and gold had to be physically shipped.
The pound became the global reserve currency through military force, but through monetary credibility.
By 1900, 60% of global trade was denominated in pounds.
When a Japanese company bought American wheat, they settled the transaction in pounds.
When a German bank loaned money to a Brazilian railroad, the loan was denominated in pounds. The pound was the global unit of account.
This created an extraordinary privilege for Britain because everyone needed pounds. Britain could borrow at incredibly low interest rates.
British government issued debt, and the whole world bought it, because holding British government bonds was considered as safe as holding gold.
This allowed Britain to run permanent trade deficits. Britain could import more than it exported because the world was willing to hold pounds forever.
This is the reserve currency privilege. You can print paper, and the world gives you real goods.
You export inflation and import prosperity. Britain used this privilege to build the greatest empire in history.
But then came World War I, from 1914 to 1918.
886,000 British soldiers died. The cost was 9.6 billion, which in today's money is over 1 trillion.
Britain's national debt went from 30% of GDP to 140% of GDPs.
To fund this war, Britain did something it had never done before. It suspended the gold standard.
In 1914, the Bank of England announced that pounds would no longer be convertible to gold for the duration of the emergency. This was supposed to be temporary. But here is the thing about emergencies: they never end.
The war ended in 1918, but Britain did not immediately return to the gold standard because the debt was too large.
If Britain allowed pounds to be freely converted to gold at the old rate, everyone would immediately demand gold.
So Britain kept the gold standard suspended. The pound became a fiat currency for the first time in 100 years. Its value was now based not on gold, but on trust in the British government, and that trust was beginning to crack.
By 1925, Britain tried to restore the gold standard at the pre-war exchange rate. This was a disaster.
Did you find everything all right?
Yes, thank you.
The pound was now overvalued. British exports became expensive.
The British economy went into recession while America boomed, and critically, other nations began to question whether Britain acted.
Then came World War II. From 1939 to 1945, Britain fought for survival.
The cost was another 28 billion. National debt reached 250% of GDP.
Britain had gone from the world's largest creditor to the world's largest debtor.
Britain owed massive debts to the United States, to Canada, to India, to every colony that had supplied material during the war.
The Bank of England's gold reserves were depleted. By 1945, Britain was technically bankrupt.
But in 1945, Britain still had the reserve currency.
Global trade was still denominated in pounds. Everyone still needed pounds.
Because the world needed pounds for trade, countries were forced to continue lending to Britain, even though Britain could never realistically pay back.
Britain was able to sustain the illusion of financial strength for 11 more years, purely because of reserve currency inertia.
Everyone was trapped in the pound system. There was no alternative, yet.
But Britain made a fatal mistake during these 11 years. The same mistake Rome made. The same mistake America is making right now.
Faced with enormous debts and unable to cut spending or raise taxes enough to balance the budget, Britain started printing money.
The Bank of England expanded the money supply dramatically. From 1945 to 1956, Britain's money supply tripled.
But Britain's production of goods did not triple. The result was inflation, the pound losing purchasing power.
Foreign governments holding pounds as reserves began to notice. They began to ask questions. If we are holding pounds that are losing value every year, why are we holding pounds?
And Britain had to make a choice.
Britain could either defend the pound by raising interest rates and cutting spending, which would cause a depression, or Britain could keep printing and hope the world did not notice.
Britain chose to keep printing. This is the easy path, the fatal path.
And then came 1956, the Suez Crisis.
Egypt nationalized the Suez Canal. Britain and France, trying to reassert their imperial power, invaded Egypt to take the canal back.
The United States, which was now the real global superpower, told Britain to stand down. Britain refused. So America did something that had never been done before. America attacked the pound.
The US Treasury began selling pounds and buying dollars on foreign exchange markets. Within days, the pound crashed.
Britain was hemorrhaging gold. Britain was hemorrhaging gold reserves, trying to defend the pound's value.
Within a week, Britain had lost 15% of its entire gold reserves.
The Bank of England was on the verge of running out of gold completely.
Britain was forced to go to the International Monetary Fund and beg for a loan. The IMF agreed, but only on one condition.
Britain had to withdraw from Egypt immediately. Britain complied. The empire was over.
But more importantly, the reserve currency was over.
The Suez Crisis proved that Britain no longer had the financial strength to maintain the pound as the global currency. International traders and central banks began a slow, then sudden shift out of pounds and into US dollars.
By 1967, the pound was devalued by 14% overnight. By 1971, the pound was devalued again. By 1992, the pound crashed so hard during the Black...
The pound went from controlling 60% of global reserves in 1945 to controlling less than 5% by 2000.
The fall took 11 years to begin and 50 years to complete. But the breaking point was 1956.
Now let us turn that mirror toward ourselves. Let us look at the United States of America.
Just like Britain, America emerged from World War II as the dominant power.
And just like Britain after World War I, America created a new monetary system at a conference in Bretton Woods in 1944.
The US dollar would be convertible to gold at $35 per ounce.
Other currencies would be pegged to the dollar. The dollar replaced the pound as the global reserve currency. This created the same extraordinary privilege.
Because everyone needed dollars, America could borrow at low interest rates.
America could run trade deficits. America could print money, and the world would accept it because dollars were needed for international trade. And just like Britain, America began to abuse this privilege.
In the 1960s, America fought the Vietnam War while simultaneously launching the Great Society welfare programs. Gold began draining out of the US Treasury as foreign nations exchanged dollars for gold.
By 1971, just like Britain in 1914, America suspended the gold standard. President Nixon closed the gold window.
Its value was now based entirely on trust in the U.S. government.
This is America's 1914 moment. And just like Britain, America was able to keep the reserve currency for a while through inertia.
The world was trapped in the dollar system. There was no alternative. But America, just like Britain, made the fatal mistake.
Faced with enormous debts and unable to cut spending or raise taxes enough, America started printing money. Massive amounts of money.
From 2008 to 2020, money supply Canadian toy increased by over 100%. But America...
The result is inflation. The dollar is losing purchasing power.
And just like Britain in the 1950s, foreign governments holding dollars are beginning to notice.
China holds $770 billion in U.S. Treasury bonds. They are watching the dollar lose value every year.
China has reduced Treasury holdings by $530 billion from the peak.
Japan has reduced holdings by $220 billion. Saudi Arabia is negotiating to sell oil in yuan instead of dollars.
Russia, Iran, Brazil, India, South Africa, the BRICS nations are creating alternative payment systems to bypass the dollar.
The world is slowly, then suddenly, beginning to move out of dollars.
And now we arrive at 2027. Why 2027?
Because 2027 is 16 years after the 2011 debt ceiling crisis, which was America's first major credibility crack.
More importantly, 2027 is the year that several critical tipping points converge.
$7.6 trillion in U.S. debt matures and must be refinanced at much higher interest rates.
The interest expense on the national debt will exceed $1.5 trillion, consuming 30% of all federal tax revenue.
Social Security's trust fund will be in crisis. Medicare will be approaching insolvency.
Critically, 2027 is the year when the global oil market is projected to see more than 30% of transactions occur in non-dollar currencies. Once that threshold is crossed, the network effect breaks. The dollar loses critical mass. This is America's 1956 Suez moment, the crisis that proves the reserve currency is finished.
सेक्शन में उसी प्लेटिनिक सिंसेडी क्योर्चिंग गिल के 18 को जिसमें दृश्य बहुत कटिंग तथा सवारी इरशांगे किसी भी
Perhaps it is a failed treasury auction. Perhaps it is a spike in interest rates that crashes the stock market and freezes the banking system.
Perhaps it is a major oil producer announcing they will no longer accept dollars.
The specific trigger does not matter. What matters is that the system is already broken. The trigger just reveals it. And just like Britain from 1956 to 1992, once the break happens, the decline accelerates. It will not be a single-day collapse. It will be a cascading loss of confidence over 10 to 20 years. The dollar's share of global reserves will fall from 58% to 40% to 25%. American living standards will fall as import prices spike. The federal government will face impossible choices. Raise interest rates to defend the dollar and crash the domestic economy.
The pattern is clear. The timeline is mathematical.
America's reserve currency is now 16 years past the 2008 financial crisis and 4 years past the COVID money printing.
Sir John Globel's research shows empires last 250 years, but reserve currencies last even less.
The British pound lasted 120 years as reserve currency. The Dutch guilder before that lasted 80 years.
The US dollar became the reserve currency in 1944. 2024 is 80 years.
We are now in the historically dangerous zone, where every previous reserve currency has collapsed.
We have checked every box on the list. Massive debt that can never be repaid. Money printing on an unprecedented scale. Loss of credibility with foreign creditors.
Britain in the 1950s believed the pound would last forever because it was backed by the British Empire and 200 years of tradition.
America in the 2020s believes the dollar will last forever because it is backed by the US military and 80 years of dominance.
But dominance built on debt and money printing is an illusion. And illusions shatter.
It is the moment when the mathematical weight of debt becomes undeniable, when the loss of reserve currency status becomes irreversible.
When the decline from superpower to normal country becomes inevitable.
When Britain lost reserve currency status, the British people did not disappear. Britain still exists.
The global influence vanished. The ability to borrow at cheap rates disappeared.
Britain went from being the center of the financial world to being a mid-tier economy dependent on others. The transition was painful and permanent.
That is America's future. Not extinction, but decline.
A decline that has already begun, but most Americans do not see yet, because reserve currency inertia creates a lag.
The system appears fine until the moment it breaks. And the break comes fast.
The money has already been printed. The debts can never be repaid in real terms.
The only question now is what you're going to do to prepare for the transition. You cannot stop the cycle of reserve currency collapse. It is bigger than any individual. It is bigger than any government.
But you can learn from Britain's experience. You can refuse to be like the British banker in 1945 who believed the system was permanent.
You can hold assets that survive transitions, gold, productive land, skills, businesses that generate real value.
Help us! Over here!
The clock is ticking toward 2027.
The reserve currency trap has been sprung. The pattern is complete. The final act has begun.